absolutely, I think this is the best book that I've read so far this year. Decided at the last minute to go ahead and post a 1-star review. I have had some really great 5-star reads, and I have had some really... Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patricia Meredith, and I am an author of historical mystery. I have 2 series out right now, the first 3 in the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, which is set in 1901 Spokane. And then I have my new book, the beginning of the Anna Katharine Green Mysteries, A Deed of Dreadful Note. And that is set in 1872 New York. Now, although I spend most of my time researching for these historical mysteries, and believe me, it's a lot of research, and if you want to learn more, check out my website at patricia-meredith.com, or subscribe to my channel here because I'm always posting videos about the research behind the books. But in addition to reading a lot for research, I also enjoy reading books for fun. Wow, shocker, she's an author who enjoys reading. I have to be honest, it actually sometimes is really hard for me to find a book that is different enough and yet is giving me the vibes that I want while I'm writing. I have to be very choosy about what I'm reading while I'm writing. For example, when I was writing A Deed of Dreadful Note, which is all about Anna Katharine Green and is deep historical fiction, I really wanted to get into her writing because it's all told first person from her point of view. And so I was listening to books written by her, like the Leavenworth case, while I was writing it. So that way her influence would be on my writing. Now, that is not always the case, though. Usually I am reading all across the board. I enjoy fantasy, science fiction, mystery, any genre. I read a lot of books with my kids for homeschool, and so I thought it would be fun, since we are at the halfway point of the Goodreads Reading Challenge, and this is my 3rd year, I believe, doing this. Yes, first year I did a goal of 50 books, last year I did 100 books, and I barely made it in by the end of it. This year I am well ahead of my goal. It's going along great. And I think part of that is because I went ahead and decided I was allowed to include the books that I'm reading with my kids for the homeschool portion of our day, because I'm reading books, and I have thoughts on them. So that has helped me keep on top of my goal of 100 books to read by the end of the year. So since today is July 1st, that is about the halfway point, and so I wanted to share what my thoughts are on some of the books that I have read so far. I have had some really great 5-star reads, and I have had some really bad reads. In fact, I had one book that I originally didn't even leave a review because I was just going to mark that I had read it and then just leave it there. And I decided at the last minute to go ahead and post a 1-star review because I think my thoughts needed to be shared and other people needed to know what was in there and why I really didn't like this book that was very popular. I will not mention it here. If you want to know what it is, go follow me on Goodreads and you'll see in my Goodreads read list which book it is. So give me a follow there, give me a follow here. You know the drill. So here are some of the good reads that I had this year so far. So first, I wanted to give a shout out to Brad Meltzer, the author of the I Am series of short picture book biographies about important people from our history. Now, they have actually started a TV show on PBS that is based on his books, and it's still in his art style, and it is wonderful. But I just have to say that I was really, really impressed with the writing of these books. They all have a very clear goal in mind, a moral that can be learned from these historical people, from history. He doesn't skirt over the difficult issues, and yet it is still family friendly and child appropriate. And so if you're looking for picture book level books to read with your kids for homeschool or just for fun, I highly recommend this series of books. Going along in a similar vein, my children recently discovered the Jansen series. Now, this is actually the only one we own in paperback, but just so you can see the level of writing, it's got pictures, it's a very early chapter book, I guess is what you would call it. But we have actually been listening to these as audiobooks through our library, and they are really well done. They are maybe half an hour when you listen to them. Something that I do in my homeschool is every afternoon, my kids and I have tea together and we listen to a book. And these are the perfect length for a pause in our day to listen to a mystery. Now, eventually I will be posting a video of my top mysteries that are for children, and this is definitely going to be on that list. So if you're interested in mystery, if your kids are interested in mystery, or you just want to introduce them to something like that, Cam Jansen is excellent. She has a photographic memory, and she and her friends use that ability to solve mysteries that are happening in their town. These are all very child-friendly, no murders as far as I can think of that we've come across. It's all been, thieves and con men and things like that. And so they have been very good, and I highly recommend them. One of the other books that I started my year off with reading, and I technically read this like over Christmas break and New Year's, and then I finished it in this year. So it's counting for this year. I could have counted it for last year. It doesn't matter. The point is, It's a Wonderful Woof by Spencer Quinn. Now, this is the 6th or 8th book in the Chet and Byrne mystery series, which is one of my favorite mystery series to read of all time. It is one that I go back to when I want just something that is familiar and that I love so much. So the Chet and Byrne mysteries begin with Doggone It, and then I have the first 4 in paperback, and then I've been listening to them on audio. They're really well read. They're excellent. The whole series is told from the point of view of Chet, the dog. And you find that out right away, so it's not giving anything away, because that is the sell point for this series, is it is all from his point of view. So he and his owner, Byrne, who is his best friend, go solve mysteries. Now, these are adult mysteries. These are not child-friendly. I highly recommend the audiobooks, because then it's just hearing Chet tell you a story, and they're just really well done. So if you're looking for a new mystery series, this one I highly recommend. And if you're a dog lover, you're going to love this series even more. Towards the beginning of this year, my husband began working on his 3rd book in the Collation Saga series, so I re-listened to the audiobook of his 2nd book, Bone Shroud, and that is on the list. So this is Andrew D. Meredith, my husband. This is the 2nd book in the series. You definitely need to start with Deathless Beast, which is the 1st book in the series, and they are wonderful, and as I just said, he does the audiobooks, so they are really well read. He has an acting background, and so there are character voices, and he gets to put the nuance and the emphasis where he wants it on each syllable, as my grandfather used to say. And it's just so well read, and it's wonderful listening to them. So if you're into epic fantasy, I highly recommend these. They are getting some incredible reviews from reviewers outside of his wife. But even though I'm a little bit biased, I definitely highly recommend this series. They are so well written and so deep. This is the series that he's been working on since he was 15. So there is so much world to go into these. Very character driven. I love the characters, and he is currently putting the finishing touches on the audiobook for book 3, so be looking for that. I then listened to the 3rd book in the Richard Osman Thursday Murder Club series, and this is another series where if you have not discovered this yet, it's been all over the internet. It is highly recommended. And I also highly recommend the audiobook. So I tend to read most of my books through audiobook. I have found that works best for me. I get through more books that way. It's what I do to fall asleep. But it also, throughout the day, if I'm gardening or washing dishes or doing laundry or whatever, all those things that you have to do because you're an adult, they become so much easier and more enjoyable when you're listening to a book. Also because then I feel like I'm multitasking and I'm getting things done. So I'm actually reading books and getting lost in a world instead of lost in the laundry. So the Thursday Murder Club series is excellent. I read the 3rd one, The Bullet That Missed. All I can say is that every single book in this series so far has been just as good as the first one. He hasn't dropped the ball yet, which is incredible, right? With a debut author especially. He has a comedian background, and these are his first mysteries that he has written, but I think he was born to write these. They are just so wonderful. The character work is excellent. The mysteries are wonderful. The twists and where things fall, his pacing is excellent. They are incredible, top-notch mysteries. Again, these are adult reads, so there are some themes in there, but other than that, they're very clean. There's nothing gratuitous about anything that comes up, no matter what the topic is. And so I highly recommend these. They are really, really good. I then did another comfort read for myself, which was a return to the nursery crime series by Jasper Ford. The first one is The Big Over Easy, which features the death of Humpty Dumpty, and they have to solve the mystery. So then that was last year. And then this year, I came back to The Fourth Bear, and that is the second one. Unfortunately, he has only written 2 in this series, and I keep waiting for him to write another one, but he's working on other things, I guess. But Jasper Ford is an incredible Welsh author. I absolutely love his play on words, and these are full of nursery rhyme references. Everything is very adult, however. Again, these are adult mysteries. These are not for kids, even though they are nursery crimes. They are not appropriate for children. There's even some language in these. And they are not gratuitous as long as you're okay with grim violence. Grim with a double M. Because they are nursery rhymes and that level of violence, right? So there are things like that come up that are just so brilliantly used and so well done. I highly recommend this series. This is another series that I just absolutely adore, and I love coming back to it. It's a wonderful comfort read for me. So this is the second one. Again, though you could kind of read them out of order, but I recommend that you start with The Big Over Easy. It's an introduction to who Jack Sprat, the main investigator, is, and his counterpart, Mary Mary. So highly recommend. Continuing in the theme of Jasper Ford, I then switched series into his Thursday Next series, and the one I listened to was called The Woman Who Died a Lot, and this is the 7th book in the Thursday Next series. You definitely need to read them in order because they just build on each other. The very first one in the series is called The Heir Affair, and you get an introduction into who Thursday Next is. It is actually my least favorite of the books. It is the one where it feels like Jasper Ford was throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck, and what it turned out was what everybody enjoyed the most was her ability to jump into books and solve crimes within the fictional jurisfiction world. And so he ends up diving into that a little bit more in his later books. And so The Woman Who Died a Lot is book 7 in this series. Now, I will say The Woman Who Died a Lot was probably my least favorite Thursday Next novel thus far. It reminded me a little too much of the first one. The things that I didn't like about the first one were reiterated in this one. So I'm really looking forward to him continuing the series. And this book ended as though he will be continuing it, so I'm looking forward to that because there are other books in this series that I enjoyed more. So we'll see if he continues. If not, it is worth reading the first 7 books because you will find some favorites in there. My kids and I then really enjoyed discovering Escape from Mr. Lemoncellos Library by Chris Grabenstein. I cannot recommend this book enough. It turns out it is actually a Goodreads Choice Award for middle grade and children's fiction, and I absolutely understand why it was a nominee for that. This book is full of literary references. It is basically Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but in a library. So imagine games and puzzles, and they all have to escape from the library, but it's very child friendly, like they're gonna be okay. It's not dangerous, but it's all puzzles and riddles and figuring things out. And my kids really enjoyed listening to it, and I really enjoyed reading it as well. And so it was not only enjoyable for them at their level, and so they caught some of the references. I caught almost all of them, I think. I mean, at one point I was like, I should make a list of which references I've caught. And it was like, no, it's so full of them, I can't even begin to make a list of them. Highly recommend it. I'm excited to continue the series. It turns out that there are more books in this series. Absolutely everything comes together, and it's very Willy Wonka meets board games and books. I mean, it's a love letter to all of those things. And it's one of those that it could never be well done as a TV show because it is so good as a book. So highly recommend. Excited to get into more of these books in this series. So stepping away from children's literature a little bit, I then dove into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I won't say much about this one because I did two actually book discussions about this. I read it, I did a live book discussion with three other wonderful booktubers. She is Only Evie, Tori Talks, and Kay's Hidden Bookshelf. Highly recommend that you check out that talk and then subscribe to all of their channels because they read incredible books. They have great reviews. And then, because of that, my editor friend, Corin Faya, reached out to me and said, I've never read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Would you do another buddy read with me? And I was like, well, yeah, I've read it already. Let's do another discussion. So then Corin and I dove into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it's a completely different discussion with him. So I really encourage you to check out both of those videos if you have read this book before. And if you have not, I still recommend that you check out those videos because the biggest thing that we uncovered is that the book is very different from what you think the story is about. So, highly recommend this classic piece of literature. It was around that time that I finally finished my listen through of The Lord of the Rings. Now, if you have a chance to listen to the entire series of The Lord of the Rings, starting with Fellowship of the Ring to Return of the King, cannot recommend enough the Andy Serkis version of it. Andy Serkis does an incredible job of all of the voices and just bringing the words of Tolkien to life. It is clear he has a passion for it, and he just is so in love with this world. Also, if you're a big fan of Lord of the Rings, I recommend that you also check out our live watch-along that we did around that time earlier this year. Me and several fellow booktubers watched through the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We did half of the extended version every night, so there's 6 different episodes. We had some different guests come on at different points, and it was just a wonderful watch along, and we got to really talk about what the differences are between the books and the movies and why Peter Jackson's version is so true to the books and how much we appreciate the changes that he did make. So if you're into Lord of the Rings, definitely check those out. So jumping back to children's lit for a minute, the Royal Diary series. Now, I grew up reading these books. This series is amazing. It is all like Elizabeth I, Queen Isabel, and then they have also gone into the last Queen of Hawaii, someone I didn't know existed, and other people from across history. These are all written in diary format, and my children and I, as part of our look into Egypt and study of Egypt, and then the end of Egypt was Cleopatra. So we read all about her. And what I love about this series is that it has historical notes in the back, right, with pictures, and it has a timeline and everything. So it's very historically accurate where she can, but it is historical fiction. So it gets my kids interested in this time period, in these people, and also this one in particular, and this is my memory of all of them in this series, but this one in particular, we know that there's not a good ending to Cleopatra's story, and because this takes place back when she is between 10 and 12 years old, it doesn't have to do with that. Now, there are some things that do come up because it's history, and there's some hard things that happen in history, and so they are handled, however, from a very child-friendly point of view, and I really appreciated that. It was really well done, really well written. Highly recommend. I then decided to treat myself to the BBC adaptations of the Lord Peter Whimsy series written by Dorothy L. Sayers. Now, I had read all of the books before, and I thought it would be fun to listen to them again, but as a BBC adaptation. And it turns out that those count as books on Goodreads. And so I went through and I listened to all of those. And if you're not familiar with Dorothy L. Sayers, I highly recommend her. She is a contemporary of Agatha Christie, and she has some very good themes in there. Her characters tend to go through character arcs rather than like Agatha Christie's characters don't really change from book to book. Poirot, Miss Marple, they are the same from the beginning to the end. Lord Peter Whimsy changes actually over the course of the books. We begin with him dealing with a lot of PTSD from the war, and then later when he meets his future love interest, he changes again. And so it's really wonderful. Harriet Vane comes along and becomes her own character as well, and she is very much based on Dorothy L. Sayers. She's an author who writes mystery, and so it's just really fun. The whole series is wonderful. The BBC adaptation was really well done. very much recommend it. It was a wonderful way to listen to it, and the guy who does the voice for Peter Whimsy is exactly what I hear in my head when I'm reading them. And that's really important to me. If he didn't sound like the Whimsy in my head, then I would not have enjoyed them as much. But because he does such an incredible job, I highly recommend listening to it through the BBC adaptations. Around the same time, I reread some books by Agatha Christie in order to discuss them with my friend Corin. So we read And Then There Were None and did a discussion of that one. And if you haven't read Agatha Christie, that is a great one to start with. It is a one-off. It is fast-paced. It is very dialogue-heavy and very plot-centric. And it is easy to get into and easy to get out of. And it is very, very good. I won't give away anything because, again, you can go check out that discussion with Corin. We also, kind of tying into that, read Nemesis, which is by Agatha Christie. And that became kind of the end commentary tying it into And Then There Were None. So go check out that video if you're interested in that. Next, I dove into a science fiction fantasy series. Yes, kind of a crossover of the two. Think Guardians of the Galaxy. This was an incredible find for me. I have so enjoyed this first book in the series, and then I'm diving into the second one here very, very soon. I actually don't have the first book in the series with me right now because it was so good. I immediately passed it on to my mother-in-law to read because I was like, you're going to love this book. So this is the Wistful Ascending series by JCM Byrne. This is an indie author who is doing an incredible job with his covers, his writing, his story is so wonderful. You can check him out on YouTube. He has his own channel, and he's been going into some incredible discussions about science fiction versus fantasy and indie versus traditional, and just his writing style and just answering lots of questions. And they're very easy videos to just watch. It's just him having a conversation. So if you want to learn more about this series, I actually recommend checking out his channel and discovering Wistful Ascending. Like I said, if you are a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, this is the series for you. It is so well done, and I know they look a little bit thick on the thicker side compared to like my mystery books, but they really are not that hard to get through. They are really enjoyable. The character work is excellent. The world building is excellent. There's no info dumps. It's very just slowly going along with the world, and you discover things. And so just trust him because he's going to take you along for an excellent ride. Excellent new science fiction fantasy genre reading. I absolutely highly recommend JCM Byrne's Wistful Ascending. I then began reading through, or rereading through, the Usagi Yojimbo series. So I was finding I was feeling really down for a period, and I needed something lighter to get me back into reading. And so I am making my way through this series. Usagi Yojimbo is a graphic novel storytelling format diving into 17th century Japan, and it stars a rabbit bodyguard. Now, all of the characters in this are animals. So you've got different kinds of ninjas. You've got the cat ninja clan, and then you've got the bat ninjas and the mole ninjas, and then you have Usagi, and he's going through and helping different people, and it is just a wonderful tale. It is mostly clean. It depends on your level. It's not gratuitous or anything like that. And there are some actually really beautiful moments in this that are just excellent storytelling. It is really well done. And so, for example, my 9-year-old has started reading these. So they are very good. And as an adult, the fable storytelling style, they're all little vignettes, and it's wonderful. There's reoccurring characters. I am on book 10 now, and then there's even more past that. So if you were looking for a graphic novel to dive into that you have a good long time to just slowly go through, Usagi is a wonderful one that I highly recommend. In fact, in the last one that I just finished, there was a whole scene where a blacksmith is making his swords and the beautiful ceremony that goes into that. And if you have read my 1901 series set in Spokane, you know that I have a main character who is a Japanese blacksmith. He also happens to be blind. And so he talks a lot about the beauty of creating swords and being a blacksmith. And so I took some notes rereading that section in the book because I want to feature all of that in my books. So these are actually turning out to be research for me. So like I said, good books. And then, based on the recommendation of Wandering with Stacy, who I had the fortune of interviewing here on my channel and who I've been following, she recommended the Stephen Lawhead series, the Bright Empires series, beginning with the Skin Map. Now, that's a really weird title, but it's actually a really good series. I love Lawhead. His version of the Robin Hood retelling of that myth. He sets it in Wales, and it's one of my favorite versions of Robin Hood. And so I am familiar with Lawhead. I enjoy Lawhead. So then starting this new series, turns out this is time travel fiction, but it's not time travel. It's alternate timelines with time travel. And so because of that, he is able to dive into history, but it's okay if it's not exact, right? But I really love the characters. I've been really drawn into the story, so I have finished the first 2 in the series so far. So thank you, Wandering with Stacy, for recommending those. I am now furthering that and also very much recommend them. I then read probably my favorite book that I have read so far this year. Very excited to talk about this book. I want to do a whole separate review of it. It is called The Wonderland Trials by Sarah Ella. Oh my goodness, I am a huge fan of twisted fairy tales and twisted familiar stories. So I love retellings of Robin Hood, retellings of Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland. Now, Alice in Wonderland is one who I didn't fall in love with because I didn't like the Disney version. It was too bizarre for me. But then as a student at Whitworth University, I took a children's literature course, and I was introduced to the annotated version of Alice in Wonderland. And what I loved about it was it explained everything to me. So then when I'm reading it, I can understand all of his references. Well, once you understand all of his references, this takes on a whole nother level of ingenuity. Alice in Wonderland is incredible. But even better than that was a retelling of it by Sarah Ella. Wonderland Trials is like the Hunger Games meets Alice in Wonderland. It was so good. I cannot recommend it enough. It was so well written. The characters are intriguing. I loved every single reference. So many references and inspiration from the original stories. It's the biggest thing I can compare it to is like Wicked, right? Not Wicked the book, which I don't care for, but Wicked the musical does such a great job of intertwining the original story of Wizard of Oz with a new retelling of it. So the Wonderland Trials does that. It is so good. Oh my goodness. There are so many wonderful themes interwoven throughout, and it is, it's like a post-apocalyptic world, and so that's where the Hunger Games essence of it, and there's the games element of it. It pulled me through so fast. It is technically YA, which just means that the main character is about that age. I forget exactly what she is. I want to say she's 16. So she's young enough that it will reach YA readers. It is clean enough that a YA reader can read it. Highly recommend, though, even as an adult, highly recommend picking it up. If you have any familiarity with Alice in Wonderland, you will love, love, love this book. The second book comes out this year. I am so excited to read it. I am so excited for Sarah and what she is doing with her worlds. She is such a joy to follow, and I look forward to reading more of her work. Absolutely, I think this is the best book that I have read so far this year, The Wonderland Trials. So when I went onto my Goodreads list, I realized that I hadn't included The Mother of Detective Fiction, which was a book, a biography that I read that was a main part of my research for writing A Deed of Dreadful Note. And so I highly recommend that you check out this if you're interested in learning more about Anna Katharine Green. I won't say too much about it because I have talked about it in other videos, but if you want to know more about Anna Katharine Green and my research, this is where I this is my primary resource, because then in the back with her bibliography, that's where I found all of my other resources. And it's the only written, published biography of Anna Katharine Green. So I highly recommend this, picking a copy up. Thank you again to Patricia Maida for your support of my book. She has been an incredible influence, and I highly recommend picking this up if you want to learn more. I also, if you look at my currently reading list right now, you'll see the Leavenworth case is on there. It's not this version though, it's my own version. So I have released the Leavenworth case as an ebook with an introduction written by myself, which tells you a little bit more about my research behind writing my book, and then talking about the tie-in to, in my book, she's writing this book, the Leavenworth case. So the ebook is available through my website. If you sign up for my newsletter, it's free. And that's at patricia-meredith.com. And then the audiobook will be releasing soon, and that'll be read by my husband, Andrew D Meredith, who I mentioned earlier with his books. He's an incredible audiobook narrator, and so since the main character is all told from his first person point of view, it's a male, and so having Andrew read it has been so much fun to reread through the Leavenworth case, and it was such a help when writing my book. In order to listen to it and hear the voice, and in order to capture that in my own writing, so which I touched on earlier. So then finally, the last couple of books that I've been reading have been all Wizard of Oz. So again, if you want to check out a full review of Wizard of Oz and all of the books we read along with that, I did a whole discussion with my friend Corin just this past week, and we read Wizard of Oz and we read Short by Holly Goldberg Sloan. Highly recommend that as well. That is a middle grade fiction. And then along with that, I read the Oz Marvel graphic novel version. So to give me a little different version, that's the version that my kids absolutely love reading. They reread through this version over and over again because it is pictorial, and so it just brings the story to life. Having read the book, I can now officially say that yes, although this says that it is abridged because all of the descriptions have been pulled out, but everything else is in there. Every line is in this version. So this is just the first one. They've done the first, I think, 6 books in the Oz series. I hope they will continue because my kids binge read through these over and over again. So highly recommend. I then also read through the Wicked Grimmery because, as I mentioned earlier, huge fan of Wizard of Oz. Absolutely love this musical, Wicked. It's an incredible retelling of Wizard of Oz. It's kind of a twisted backstory of the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda, and it's wonderful. It's basically what happened off scene of more so the movie version than the book version, but there are lots of references to things that happen in the book that don't happen in the movie. This is one of my favorite musicals of all time. Incredible music, incredible acting. Idina Menzel played Elphaba, was the original Elphaba, and it's just an incredible world. This is the opening, vision. It's got the map, and there's a dragon up there and everything. It's an incredible, incredible version of the Oz story. Getting this and looking through this while listening to the soundtrack, I absolutely adore the soundtrack. It's one of my favorite soundtracks to listen to, and so I just highly recommend. Wizard of Oz is amazing. Definitely check out that video if you want to hear more about our thoughts on that. All right, folks, and that's where I'm at so far in my Goodreads reads for half of the year. If you go check out my list on Goodreads and follow me as an author, you will see that there are some that I didn't mention. I just didn't have time to include them in this video, and there's many that I am working on right now. Right now, I'm currently reading Remake, which is one of my favorite stories from Connie Willis. Again, you can go check out my video about how much I love Connie Willis and why this book in particular is just very timely, and it's a very wonderful science fiction. And so this is my enjoyable read right now while I work on my new book. So be sure to follow me everywhere. You can find links down below to everything that I mentioned, all those other incredible booktubers that I highly recommend, all these authors that I highly recommend. Give them a follow, and I hope I introduced you to some new books that maybe you didn't know about before, and have added some books to your want to read list for meeting your Goodreads goal for the year. So good luck with that. Enjoy your reading, and remember, you can always add these 4 books to your want to read list on Goodreads. This is the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, The first 3 are out. You do need to read them in order. And then this is the first book in my new series, Anna Katharine Green. So right now it's a standalone, but it is the first book in a series, more to come. And if you head to Goodreads right now, you can enter to win one of 20 free Kindle copies of A Deed of Dreadful Note. So be sure to add it to your to be read and follow me while you're there. And if you follow me, you'll see that I'm currently working on a new fantastical Christmas cozy mystery, and that will be releasing later this year. So be sure to follow me for all the latest news. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.